Well, I've been here a little over 5 years, I suppose, and change has been an issue that we've had to deal with almost from the day I got here. I followed a pastor who had been here for 28 years, much beloved in the life of this congregation, did an excellent job building and nurturing this congregation, but it's a rapidly growing area. In the 5 years that I've been here, we have experienced a lot of numerical growth. We have had a lot of changes in our staff. We have had significant changes in our building, just our buildings on campus. We had one building project that was underway when I arrived. We began another one shortly after I got here, which included tearing down a sanctuary, for goodness sakes, talk about change. And we're building a new one. A lot of the programs have changed, the style has changed, the people have changed. So there have been a significant number of ways in which this church has changed. I think for the long-standing members here, that change has affected them in a variety of ways. It's basically a very healthy church, and I need to say that from the start. A lot of the good that has happened, I don't know that we can take credit for it in any sense. It's just a healthy church where people are open to new ideas and open to trying things in new ways. I think there are some things we've done, though, that have helped to cultivate the change, or to smooth the way for the change. Early on, I tried to build relationships with some of those long-standing members. I wanted to get to know them and for them to get to know me, and to value the heritage of this church. It's an interesting place. There's a lot of history here, but we don't have a lot of members who've been here 20 or 30 or 40 years. It's not their history. They've been adopted into it. And so I've tried to spend a lot of time talking about the history of this church and the heritage of this church, and valuing that, and not just doing that for political reasons, but doing it because it really is valuable. We're who we are today because of what they did 20, 30, 40, even 100 years ago. I think a lot of those older members, longer term members, not necessarily older in age, but longer tenured members, have a variety of reactions to change. Some of them are afraid of it. There's that fear of the unknown. They may not know what the future is, but they know what they had in the past, and they liked that, and they don't want that to change. So there's a certain element of fear involved. And with that, I think there's a loss of control. As the church has gotten larger, the programs have gotten more complex. No one or two or three people can control things the way that perhaps they could in the past. You can't make a big influence over the big spectrum the way you could in the past. So there's a loss of control. So people are afraid, there's a loss of control. I think at times one of the issues we've had to deal with here is there's a little bit of perhaps even feeling personally insulted by change, particularly when we tore down a sanctuary. Some of the people who were on that building committee who built it are still members here. Some of the changes we've made in the staffing patterns of the church are perceived by some people as saying, you didn't like it the way I did it. What was wrong with the way I did it? And so we've had to deal with some of that. How have we overcome that? I think probably the two things that we've tried to do here to cultivate or to make the changes take place in a smooth way have been these two things. One is we've talked a lot about the reasons for change. We're not just building a bigger sanctuary to build a big sanctuary. We've talked about why we do that, the mandate we feel to be reaching out into the community. We haven't just changed the staff just to change the staff. We've talked about why. We've tried to help people understand the whys behind what we do. So that if we make a decision to, well, when we added a third worship service, for instance, or if we make a decision to alter the way we do something in church school, we want people to understand why. That way, at least, you may not agree with the change, you may not emotionally feel comfortable with the change, but at least you understand it. And we think that's critical, that's very important. And then the other thing that we've done is we've tried to nurture relationships. In a large church, that's sometimes tough to do. We talk a lot around here about hanging on to smaller church values. We want people to feel valued and needed and important. So those are probably the two things that we have done that we have been most conscious that we have done. We've also, I suppose along with that, spent a significant amount of time communicating to people what we are not going to change. I think sometimes when you start changing things, there's a fear that everything's going to change. And so we have tried to communicate to people there are certain core values that we are not going to change. Worship is going to be a priority around here. A certain style and quality of music is going to be a priority around here. Education is going to be a priority. Service and outreach and mission focus is going to be a priority. Those are the sorts of things that, had you visited this church 30 years ago, you would have said, that's what makes that church who they are. And we've hung on to those. We haven't changed those. Now maybe the way we do them is beginning to change, but those are still core values, and we talk a lot about those. So I think maybe those are three things we do. We have talked about the reasons for change. Here's why we're doing what we do. We've tried to cultivate relationships to value the people who are most affected by the change. And we have we've gone out of our way to communicate what's not going to change. You know, when you begin to think about how to articulate that in a church setting, in a Christian setting, and you think of scriptural passages that come to mind, obviously the Exodus is a big one. And I've used that theme a lot. I taught a class on Wednesday night called Wilderness Training. And it was an opportunity to study what was going on during the Exodus. I didn't tell people we're going to study change. But we were studying a group of people who were going through significant changes, who weren't real sure where they were going to end up either. Same with the book of Acts. I think those are probably the two places that we've turned to the most. In the book of Acts, you've got a group of Christians who really didn't understand what was going on, but they knew, I mean, for goodness sakes, they were called the people who turned the world upside down. They knew there was a lot of change, but I suspect didn't really clearly articulate it. So we've spent some time looking at those two passages. But we've been very fortunate that it's a healthy setting. It's an area where people are used to change. Most of the people who move in here are expecting things to change and to be different. And so that's who we are.